Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 15, Deep Throat. As usual, we're going to start with a brief or not so brief summary of the episode. Brighton, Grace, and Maggie all have the flu, and Fran and Niles are almost to their wits' end in responding to their bell ringing and providing care for them. Cece, of course, is very worried about the children, although not quite about the children, but more so that Maxwell will get sick, preventing him from escorting her to her sorority reunion. While Maggie and Brighton are very much recovered, Fran wants to take Gracie to the doctor. The doctor confirms that Gracie has just the tail end of the nasty flu, but concludes that Fran's tonsils need to come out. Despite Fran's initial hesitation, she gets admitted to the hospital to have an adult tonsillectomy. Being this is the closest she'll ever get to a large group of doctors, she has dressed to impress. The next day, the family comes to see her before her surgery, and Cece's fake well wishes prompt the family to stay through the surgery to assuage Fran's nerves. Cece goes to the reunion alone, where she is forced to admit that she has no children and isn't married. As Fran is getting wheeled to surgery, she says, "Sister Metfield, I love you." Niles doesn't think much of it, but Maxwell worries that he needed to find a way to let her down easy because he only saw her as just the nanny. When Fran is brought back from recovery, she's telling everyone she loves them. First the orderly, the second orderly, and Skinny, the IV pole. Because the surgery took longer than expected, Maxwell missed the entire reunion. At the end, Niles has caught the flu and Fran is recovering from surgery. Now they're the ones with the bells. Cece comes in to taunt Fran and gets her just desserts by drinking a yellow liquid that Fran informs her is not apple juice. Bernadette, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that was a pretty succinct, good summary.
Thank you. Would you like to talk to us about scene one?
Yes. So we open up, we're in the living room. The children are all on the couches, the chairs, all that kind of stuff. They're ringing bells because we find out they are sick with the flu. In the kitchen, Niles and Fran are bustling around trying to get, the children's needs met. And of course, Niles, as you mentioned, is at his wit's end and mentions that if the children don't stop ringing the bells, he's going to be wringing their necks.
Yep.
Fran, meanwhile, is also kind of, at her wit's end. It mentions that, she can't wait until the kids are able to go back to school. And because, she needs those 7 hours to be the bright and vivacious nanny
Yep.
that they all know.
And how can she do that if she has to spend all of her time taking care of those kids?
Exactly. And Niles previously also points out that, this will end either they go back to school or die.
Yep. I was going to mention that. The way he frames it is look on the bright side. Eventually, they'll either go back to school or they'll die.
Yes.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. So Fran goes out to the living room, and I noticed that she was coming from the back of the set, not the side door, which kind of caught my attention. Mm-hmm. And again, she's trying to, take care of the kids. Niles is in there as well. I think at some point saying, when he was young, his mom would put him in front of the fire, give him some tea and crumpets. And Fran tells him, don't share. Better that you remain an enigma, which of course has Niles a little offended about, the fact that Niles has heard many a story of Fran's family. And Fran mentions her uncle Harvey. Now, I didn't quite catch what word she used. It was a play off of nefarious, right?
I think I missed that. So I'm going to have to defer to you.
But anyway, apparently her Uncle Harvey's thing. So of course, in true Fran style, there's always a story about her relatives that she can kind of connect to whatever situation they're in.
Yeah. She never misses an opportunity to share.
Exactly. Which again is why Niles is a bit offended that Fran is telling him not to share his own stories.
Right.
Was there anything you wanted to add regarding that opening scene?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Want to take us to the office?
Well, actually, I take it back. There is one
Okay.
thing I want to point out. So when Fran comes out, the kids are, as you put it, they're on the couch or the chairs, and they're wrapped in blankets, and they're in their pajamas. And Brighton does that thing where he needs the remote, and he's like, "I can't. Can you give me the remote?" And she's like, "It's right there on the table." And he reaches his arm out, and it's just a couple inches short. Like, he could very easily push himself up and grab it, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's
It's a
just like,
classic week.
exactly. It's a classic, like, I'm sick. I need you to see to literally, almost literally all of my needs, even the ones that I could see to myself. That's the only thing I wanted to add to that.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So scene 3 or scene 2, I guess we broke them up a little differently. The next scene, regardless, is, as you said, in Maxwell's office. And Cece says, "Maxwell, I'm terribly concerned about the children." And he, of course, tells her, "Don't worry, they're kids. They just have the flu." And she said, "Who will I take to my sorority reunion?" Because obviously she couldn't be concerned about the kids for the kids' own sake, right?
Yeah.
And so we find out that Maxwell, of course, teases her a little bit, like, "Oh, is that this weekend? Oh, Maxwell, you wouldn't leave me hanging." And Niles makes a comment, "No, we cut you down eventually."
Yeah, cut you off in a week or two.
There you go. Thank you. And so Cece starts talking about how I can't wait to show you off to my old friends with their perfect doctor husbands, their 2.5 perfect children they had while earning multiple PhDs. And you can tell that she is jealous of these other women, right? And Maxwell says to her, there's no need to be jealous. You have a successful career, and, well, a successful career, Niles jumps in. How do you, Matt, balance them both, or something like that?
Yeah.
So anyway, Fran comes in around this point to, touch base with Maxwell and let him know how the kids are doing. And Cece finds out that she was just with the children and starts spraying Lysol around, which I got to say looks fairly appealing in our current climate.
Exactly.
Assuming it was effective and all that. I don't know if Lysol has been proven, but anyway, it's the thought that counts, right? Like, she's spraying and Fran has this great reaction. My mother's scent, or something like that.
Lysol, my mother's fragrance.
Thank you. Yes. And anyway, Cece makes this comment like, "Germs everywhere, nobody touch me." And Niles deadpans, "We'll try to control ourselves," or something like that.
Restrain ourselves.
Restrain ourselves. Thank you. I didn't write it down, so I'm going off memory. Anyway, Fran comes in to say that, Brighton and Maggie are doing much better, but Gracie needs to go to a doctor. And so Maxwell's like, "Well, why don't we just have the doctor come make a house call?" And Fran has this great analysis. "You can't get a doctor to make a house call if your spleen was sitting next to you on the couch." But anyway, so it's agreed that Gracie's going to go see the doctor because she's still sick. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just that at the end of this scene, Fran starts coughing, which of course is kind of alarming, to Cece especially. But she's like, "Oh no, it's just a frog in my throat."
Yep. And that, doesn't she also say, "I'm healthy as a horse," or something? Or is that later?
Probably, I don't have that specifically written down, but yeah, she's just kind of dismissive of the cough.
Right.
So then we're in the doctor's office, and Fran's weighing herself, and she's, saying that, "Oh, these
Doctor scales.
yes, they're always 6.5 pounds over."
Do you find that to be the case?
Amount.
Do you find that to be the case?
It is interesting that I one time had 2 different doctor's appointments in the same week, and there's like a difference between the 2, scales, like
right.
Not 6.5 pounds difference, but like even within a day or two, there was a difference between those 2. So, I mean,
Well,
scales, I don't know.
I'm going to go with Fran and say Dr. Scales are always 6.5 pounds over, at least.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
I think that's a great rule to live by.
So, Fran's kind of moving around the office. On the counter are like all those classic doctors, those little glass jars with the tongue depressors and cotton balls and all this stuff. And she's kind of pilfering them, putting them in her purse, telling Gracie
there you go. Yeah.
that they're great beauty supplies. And she's explaining what each, cotton and all that kind of stuff, what you can do with it. And the tongue depressors, she's like, well, she doesn't really have a specific need for them, but she'll regret it later if she doesn't take it. Right.
Right. But did you catch what started that conversation?
Remind me.
Gracie asks, why do they make you wait so long? And Fran says, because it gives you the chance to stock up on your beauty supplies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Gracie is scared. And Fran's, trying to calm her down. But of course, through the semi-open door, you hear another kid down the hall going, no, I don't want the shot. And
Exactly.
So Fran kind of kicks the door closed. And again, goes back to trying to comfort Gracie. And then she mentions that, at least your doctor doesn't have stirrups, to which Gracie is like, oh, your doctor rides a pony. And Fran's just kind of like, actually, you know what? No, you'll soon discover the joys of womanhood.
Exactly. Yeah. Great thing to say to a child who doesn't have any concept. Continue.
Yeah. And then so Dr. Link comes in.
Right.
And he mentions, he's currently kind of subbing for the other doctor, but he's a gentle doctor. And Gracie's like, oh, Fran always says you don't want a gentle doctor. And Fran corrects her, Gentile.
Right.
And then, the doctor is trying to, examine Gracie. And Gracie's like, have you ever been sued for malpractice? Which, again, she's 6.
Exactly. It's totally the question a 6-year-old would ask upon seeing the doctor.
Oh, yeah. And Fran's kind of like, have you? And he's kind of like, oh, we settled it out of court.
Right.
But he wants to take a look at Gracie's throat, but notices there are no tongue depressors. And so Fran kind of nonchalant, tries to pass it off like, oh, grabs one from her purse. Like, oh, what's this doing here? You never know if you're going to meet Monty Hall or something.
Exactly.
And then she starts obviously trying to redirect the attention by looking at all of the certificates on the wall. Harvard, Yale, Columbia. Oh, he must have never settled down anywhere. She inquires if he is single or, if he has a wife. He mentions he's divorced. And so Fran cracks the joke. Oh, she's the missing link.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh, haven't heard that before.
A little testily, you should add.
Yeah. Yep. And anyway, finally, now that he has a tongue depressor, Gracie doesn't really want to open her mouth to say, ah. So Fran's like, oh, look, just like this. And so Fran does it. And then Gracie, puts her head right next to Fran and does it. That's when Dr. Link mentions, oh, it's just the tail end of the flu for Gracie. But then he looks at Fran and he's like, well, I'd like to see yours. And Fran immediately gets up trying to rush out, but is stopped and finally takes another depressed tongue. He actually, I think, goes into her purse and gets another tongue depressor.
Because he knows where they all are.
Yeah. And then he mentions after looking that, oh, he thinks he needs to take the tonsils out. Fran says, well, if it's not to a dinner and dancing, then it's not interested.
Right. Which is a great response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you have anything to add in that particular scene?
No, I don't think so. I think you did a great job summarizing it.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess then we go to, it's after this, and I guess Fran's changed her mind because now she's in the hospital. And she's sort of complaining about the accommodations, like they didn't have enough hangers and they didn't do turn down service. They didn't leave a chocolate on the pillow. And Niles points out, they do turn down your bed and leave Valium on your pillow. And so
Mm-hmm.
she's sort of assuaged by that. And meanwhile, Maggie's helping her unpack, and she's like, you can't possibly wear all these things. Like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, Fran says, listen, this is the closest I'm ever going to get to a large group of doctors. I promised Ma I'd look my best. And you'll notice that we've seen some of those outfits before. Like, I think we see the sweater she was wearing with the episode with the Butlers Association. We see the dress she was wearing on her birthday. So kind of to your point, it's nice to see her repeat things. Anyway, so not Brighton. So anyway, the family's talking to her, and Brighton says to her, "You're being really brave about the surgery. I'd be afraid I was going to die."
Mm-hmm.
And like,
exactly what you want to hear, right?
Yeah, exactly. So she appropriately responds, "Aren't visiting hours for children over?" And Maxwell's like, "Yeah, let's not be silly. Let's not be crazy. Your life insurance is paid up, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Which made me wonder, like, why would Fran have life insurance?
And why would Maxwell be concerned about that?
Right.
Is he expecting to be the beneficiary?
Right. It just seemed like a strange thing. I mean, I guess it goes along the lines of Brighton being like, you might die.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, Nurse Smith comes in and says to Niles, get in bed. To which he says, I'm not the patient. And she says, I know.
Yeah.
Fran's in bed, and she's, Nurse Smith tells her, don't talk. And Fran stops talking, and Maxwell's like, wow, that's all it takes. And so, she's there. She tries to get Fran to sign some like informed consent paperwork. And Fran gets upset about possible complications, which Nurse Smith mentions, like it's possible, like if they leave in a sponge or something. Just what everyone wants to think about, right? And anyway, Nurse Smith tries to get rid of the family and tells Fran, visiting hours are over, say goodbye. And Fran says, you mean good night? Whatever, I'm off in 15 minutes. So the family's saying their goodbyes. And Gracie offers to leave Teddy, because, Fran otherwise would be sleeping alone and it's scary. And Fran makes the comment, look at his nice furry back. He must come from my neighborhood. And Gracie basically says, he hates being drooled on. I don't remember how she framed it.
Try not to drool.
Try not to drool. He hates that. Right. Thank you. And then, as the family's leaving, Fran turns to Teddy and says, you think about getting frisky in the middle of the night. Don't wake me. So the family leaves, and that's pretty much it for the scene. The next scene is also in the hospital room, but I'll let you take over.
Yeah. And let me just add, in addition to Brighton saying like, I would be afraid that I would die, Maggie says that she loves one of Fran's vests as she's helping to unpack, asks if she could have it if Fran doesn't like it. Niles mentions like a Reba McEntire CD.
Yep.
And Fran's like, at least wait until they hang the tag on my toe. And, Maxwell mentions life insurance. But at the end of the scene with Gracie, I thought it was interesting. Again, trying to comfort Gracie. She's like, what's my last name? And Gracie's like, fine. And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll be fine.
Right.
So, yeah. So you're right. The next scene is still in the hospital. At some point, Fran obviously has changed into a bright yellow pajamas. The other woman in her room is an older woman who, I don't know if they ever tell us specifically, but she's obviously
unconscious.
It seems like she must be in some type of coma or vegetative state or something. I don't know.
Yeah, she's clearly unconscious because
she is clearly unconscious. But interestingly, there is a tray for her for dinner, and Fran mentions, she's just talking as if to the woman that Fran's not allowed to eat, but you go ahead. And then she opens up the platter to look at it. Oh, turkey. I wonder if it's, and I couldn't quite catch the two words she used. One was pressed, right?
Yeah. Is it real or pressed? I think is what she said.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that means, but.
Yeah. And then she's like, oh, let me try. And, she starts eating it. She talks about, how when her mother had a hysterectomy, her mother almost went in and took it out herself.
Because why did her
I can't
mother almost?
remember.
Because she had a chatty roommate.
Ah,
Which is funny
and
because
which is not a problem for
Fran is
Fran is the chatty roommate.
exactly.
Then Fran is wanting to watch TV. And she mentioned something about the Menendez Boys, and she grabs what she thinks is the remote control.
Yep.
But it turns out to be the controller for the roommate's bed because, Fran starts hitting buttons and the bed is folding up and down, even to the point where it's kind of the bottom and the top are coming together to smush it. Fran is not noticing this in the back until she kind of yanks it and the alarm starts going off. And of course, Fran then rushes into her own bed to pretend like she has no idea why.
Right.
It was interesting because it was actually the same Nurse Smith who comes in with two orderlies.
Yep.
And I noticed, well, this I would assume is past that 15 minutes that she was going to get off.
See, I would think that too.
Yeah. So again, Fran just kind of acts like, oh, I have no idea. And then asks one of the orderly, by the way, when you get a chance, I need a TV
I need
controller. Yeah. So anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. So I think, and I'm doing my confirmatory research right now, I was right. It is the same orderly, one of the same orderlies that we saw on the Christmas episode.
Oh,
yeah, I mentioned.
Really?
Yeah, I mentioned this when we did the Christmas episode that we're going to see the orderly again, and I've just confirmed on IMDb that Lawrence A. Manley was the orderly. It was orderly one, both on the episode titled Deep Throat and the Christmas episode.
Interesting.
So it's a little bit of repeat, which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's all I wanted to add to that scene.
Okay.
So in the next scene, we're, believe it or not, still in the hospital. And what is Fran doing? She's reading Cosmo. And she's filling out, reading might be the wrong word. She's filling out a Cosmo quiz about whether she leads men on.
Mm-hmm.
Never, all, originally she says, well, never. Okay, sometimes, fine, all the time. Never, who will know? She goes back to her original answer. The family comes to visit her, and check in on her, and they're like, oh, good, she's alive. Of course she's alive. They haven't had the surgery yet. And of course, Brighton is being Brighton. And he just happens to mention, well, one slip of that scalpel, and I'll tell you later. Yeah. And meanwhile, with the family is Cece, who's dressed up all nice for her reunion. And, Fran even comments how nice she looks. And well, Cece's put on the spot and asked if she wants to say something nice to Fran before Miss Fine before her surgery. And so Cece wanders over to Fran's bed and says, Nanny Fine, I know you're scared now, but just remember when you wake up from surgery, just remember the agonizing pain from an adult tonsillectomy is worse than anything you can imagine. Good luck. And well, needless to say, Fran suddenly doesn't want to do the surgery anymore. And so she's going to get out. She's trying to get out of bed and leave. And Maxwell basically offers, like, would it make you feel better if we all stayed through the surgery? And Cece, of course, is like, no, she's a big girl. She doesn't need that. And Fran's like, yeah, that would help. And so Cece, of course, is upset because she's supposed to go to her reunion and Maxwell's supposed to accompany her. And she point blank says, who's more important, me or the nanny? And Maxwell sort of dodges the question and says, go on, I'll catch up with you later. Well, yeah. But we'll discuss what happens after. Is there anything else you want to add to the scene?
Yeah, there are several exchanges between Niles and Cece. Cece kind of just calls Niles a servant, and Niles responds by saying, at least when I offer something, they take it.
Good point.
And then later, when Oh, and Cece asks Fran, well, where are those parents you're always talking about? And she says, oh, they're making their annual trip to the Holy Land.
Correct.
And Niles is like, Jerusalem? And she's like, no, Miami.
Yeah.
And then after Cece asks that question, who is more important, me or the nanny? I think it's the Jeopardy tune that Niles is kind of humming
He is,
to
yes.
Maxwell. And like you said, Maxwell kind of dodges it. And then of course Niles can't resist doing one more barb at Cece because Cece's like, well, who am I supposed to take then? Who's supposed to escort me? And Niles is like, well, you can always inflate one like you usually do, or something like that. So
Yes.
there was just a lot of little jabs between them.
No, that those are all excellent points. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the next scene's pretty short. Cece is at her sorority reunion,
Yep.
and she's with two other women who apparently work for NASA and the UN.
Yep.
And
Very
they're,
accomplished.
sharing pictures. Hmm?
Very accomplished sorority members.
Yes, yes, indeed. And they're sharing photos of their children. And again, um, they're kind of fishing for, information about how Cece's life is. And of course, Cece eventually has to say, she's not married and she doesn't have children, to which, there's that kind of fake, kind of
Aww.
awe kind of thing from the other women. But there's kind of the undertone of, ooh, pray, like, ooh, we can kind of lord over Cece in a way.
Yes. I just want to point out that, as you noted, that her sorority sisters work at NASA and UN, and in the conversation they're talking about, thank God NASA and the UN have daycare, and the woman who works at the UN points out that her little bootress can say jungle gym in 15 languages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's pretty much, like exactly how Cece envisioned it would be.
Yep.
But she doesn't have Maxwell with her to kind of show off.
Correct. Although you also have to sort of wonder what that would have looked like had he been there, right?
Yeah. Because, again, Cece's always wanting something more.
Correct.
And Maxwell, again, although he can be ambiguous at sometimes, he's not one to take her up on,
her many, many, many offers.
Exactly. As Niles pointed out.
Yes. I will not remember to mention this in our future fun segment, so I apologize to our listeners who don't want to hear these things in the midst of our conversations. But in just a few weeks, I think like 6 weeks, 5 weeks, when we do the episode Ode to Barbara Joan, there's a comment where Cece says Cece's dad is in town, and she comments about how she'd like him to meet the man in her life. And she's obviously meaning Maxwell, and Maxwell's response is, well, by all means, bring him. Like, he just has no idea that at that point, he just has like no idea that she's in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's all.
Which is interesting for a later scene we have in this, but yeah.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back at the hospital in the next scene, and Nurse Smith gets Fran to sign the consent forms after she's already started to become woozy from the drugs, and the anesthesia impacts her real quick. I don't know if that's accurate or not. She says things like, "Oh no, I've lost the children," and she turns to Maxwell, "Don't tell Mr. Sheffield."
Mm-hmm.
And of course the children had just gone down to the cafeteria to eat, and she's like, "Well, I hope they don't have turkey. It's pressed."
Mm-hmm.
And so, at some point, as Fran's kind of sort of out to lunch, Maxwell says to Niles that Fran is, dead to the world, and she jumps in, "I'm dead? Oh no, that's so sad. I want Maggie to have all my clothes, and I want Gracie to have all my Barbie dolls." And, kind of as you pointed out before, Niles starts to focus on the Reba McEntire CDs or records or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And not Maxwell doesn't like that, but then Fran, I think she grabs Maxwell's tie and says,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Meffield, and he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't realize that she's talking to him, and Niles like, I think she's talking to you. Mr. Meffield, I want you to have me.
Mm-hmm.
And like the color drains from his face. And I think at that point the doctor comes in to, get the young lady and take those tonsils out. And he comments on that he's surprised that she hasn't taken her own tonsils. And so Maxwell, she's taken out by the orderlies, and Maxwell and Niles go up to the doctor and say, I think Maxwell says, Doctor, perhaps while you're in there, you could have a look at her adenoids. Why? Do they bother her? Well, not so much her. We have a theory that perhaps something's loose in there. Yes, anything that jiggles, tighten it up.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I guess she wasn't out of the room yet, because my next comment is, as she's leaving the room, she says,
Mm-hmm.
Sister Meffield, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And needless to say, that was not exactly what Maxwell wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm. Kind of. So I will just add, so at the beginning of the episode, the nurse is administering and the I'm assuming anesthesia, and tells her to count back from 100. Fran says 100, 99, 98, and then she starts saying 97 bottles of beer on the wall.
Right.
And then, like you said, they quickly sign the release form, and like Niles and Maxwell are helping the nurse on this. And it again questions the legality, and they're like, oh, this is how we get most of the people. And I'm just like, that's not informed consent, but
yeah.
okay. Now I'm not a doctor, obviously, but a lot of the medical stuff in this episode just doesn't seem accurate to me.
Fair.
I don't know if that was anything you really noticed. But I would assume if she is getting put under, it would be in the operating room with an anesthesiologist. I don't know why she had to stay the night prior. But anyway, the main takeaway from this scene, though, is while Fran's out of it, saying to Mr. Sheffield, I want you to have me. And of course, the I love you at the end.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we cut to Cece's reunion. Maxwell, of course, is still not there.
Yep.
And Cece's trying to play it off like, oh, he worships the ground I walk on. And the two women kind of casually are like, oh, from a distance. And Cece's clearly annoyed and stuff. So she decides to stir the pot a little bit. And she's like, oh, it's a wonder that you guys are still friends. I thought you'd never forgive her for the weekend in our Barbados with Bill. And one woman turns together and goes, my Bill? Mm-hmm. So obviously Cece has, again, released a secret to kind of get the attention off of her.
Right.
And kind of sow some discord between the two other women.
Right. It's
a very quick scene, to just show that Cece's still alone.
Correct. The one thing I'll say is that I grabbed the dialogue that you referenced at first, and the thing that ticks Cece off is the comment, your Maxwell has obviously been detained by something more important.
Uh-huh.
To which Cece says, he'll be here any minute. He absolutely worships the ground I walk on. And then the response is, so I take it he'll be worshiping from afar? That's the exchange you were referring to before.
Yeah.
Do you want to take the next scene? Because I feel like you're getting a lot of like short reunion scenes.
Sure. We're back in the hospital. The kids are in the room with, Maxwell and Niles. Brighton notes that, if you squeeze the IV, blood comes up or whatever. Of course, that's horrifying. He's like, oh, it's just, hypothetical, or, something like that, plays it off. the doctor comes in to let them know that, the surgery is over. It's fine. He notes that, he did check out the adenoids and, um, but he didn't remove it because he was worried that the head might cave in if he
Correct.
did because they're so large or whatever. Maxwell sends the children to go down. He gives money for flowers to Maggie, and then Gracie's like, "What about some candy?" So he hands her the money, and then Brighton's like, "What about a Playboy?" And Maxwell's like, "No." And he's like, Brighton's like, "Worth the shot."
Yeah.
So once again, it's just Niles and Maxwell in the room, and you know, Maxwell's fretting over what Fran had said, and Niles is like, "No, she was woozy. I wouldn't take it seriously." But Maxwell's like, "Oh, can't believe she's been pining away, and I didn't notice. I've always only thought of her as just the nanny." But then he gets kind of like contemplative, like with a kind of a smile.
Yep.
She's wonderful, wise, sweet. There's another adjective I couldn't
Yeah, I
quite
have
catch in
it.
time.
I have it if you want it.
Sure.
I always thought of her as just the nanny, a wonderful nanny to be sure, loving and wise in her way, funny, sweet. And then Niles cuts in, but just the nanny. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
This is all
Yeah.
so awkward. Not that I can blame her. I suppose she was just dazzled.
Yep. Yep. And then so he's like, I gotta let her down gently. But at that moment, Fran's being wheeled in and she's saying, "I love you" to one of the orderlies, and then turns to the other one and also says, "I love you" to him. That what the first orderly is like, she was the most popular girl in recovery.
Yep.
And so Maxwell to Niles is like, "I don't want to hear about
Wait,
it."
hold
And
on.
then
Hold on.
oh,
So she was the most popular girl in recovery, says the orderly. And then Fran turns to the IV pole and says, "Hey, Skinny, I love you too." And that's when Maxwell turns to Niles.
Yeah, like, "I don't want to hear it." So Niles leaves the room and you can hear him laughing in the hallway.
Correct.
So anything you want to add?
No, that's all.
Okay.
You did a great job with that scene.
Thank you.
So in the next scene, we're back to the reunion, and Cece is entertaining herself by dancing with a punch ladle. And Maxwell rushes in and he says, "I'm sorry I'm late." And she says, "I want you to, come meet everyone. I want you to meet the light of my life, Maxwell Sheffield." And then the camera zooms out and we determine that no one's there except the janitor who, wipes his hand and is very excited to shake Maxwell's hand. So,
yep. It's a very quick, very quick. Because of course, at the beginning of that scene, it's zoomed in on Cece. So it's not until we zoom out that we realize, yep, everybody else is gone.
correct.
So then we're back in the living room. Fran is on the couch in a robe that we have seen before. So this is a repeat robe. And Niles, meanwhile, is obviously sick, sitting in one of the chairs. It's their turn to have the bells that we saw the children have in the first scene.
Yep.
And so they're ringing. Niles is also, Fran has a little whiteboard that she can write on. So she wants ice cream. Niles is like, "Okay, I'll get that for you." And he rings the bell and summons the children.
Yep.
And, tells them that he would like tea. Fran would like ice cream, and then Fran writes on her board quickly, sprinkles. So Brenton's like, "Okay, what sprinkles?" Cece comes in, and while the kids are leaving, of course, I think it's Brighton who makes the comment of like, whose idea was it to give them bells? So it's a bit of a taste of their own medicine. But Cece comes in. She's absolutely delighted that Fran can't talk. She's like, "Cat got your tongue? Oh, this is dream." Wait.
No. She says, you're right with the "cat got your tongue," but she also says, "I have died and gone to heaven." And Niles says, "I have that dream too, but you go in the opposite direction."
Yep. Yep. And then meanwhile, Cece's still kind of approaching Fran, delighted that she can't, she even says he
Yep.
at one point. That Fran can't really communicate, and then she's pouring herself a drink and she's drinking it, and meanwhile Fran has this smile on her face, and she puts up the whiteboard which says that's not apple juice, and then it freeze frames on like Cece just looking absolutely disgusted.
Horrified.
Yes.
Disgusted.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anything to add on that scene?
No. I think it's a great, like, if the episode had ended there, it would have been perfect.
Mm-hmm.
The next scene is Fran is now unpacking from her hospital stay, and she has kind of like a Mary Poppins-esque bag.
Yep.
Where she's just pulling things out. And, we talked about before, when she was checking into the hospital, she had all this clothing that she, put in the drawers and hung on the hangers and whatnot. But here she's unpacking other things. She takes out things like a bedpan, a vomit catcher, an IV holder, and Niles asks, "What are you going to do with that?" And she in her scratchy voice says that she was thinking of turning it into a lamp.
Yep. And that's where we end. But yeah, it was very reminiscent of Mary Poppins.
Yeah. Are there any big picture things you want to
just
talk about?
Noting that, like I said, I feel like there are a lot of continuity or like things I noticed errors throughout. Just again, them coming from the back when they were supposedly coming from the kitchen. And then again, some of the like medical aspects of it didn't seem quite realistic, but that's just me. And again, I'm not a doctor, so who knows?
Fair. No, I didn't even think about the, why would she check in the night before versus like, it would be one thing like to check in the night before if your surgery like started like 4 a.m. or something, right? Like sometime that it would make sense. But it seemed as though her surgery started much later, since it started after, Cece was already dressed and ready to go to her reunion, and then Maxwell obviously missed the whole thing.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yep. And then also I was like to myself, I'm like, well, if you're not allowed to eat food, don't eat food.
Correct. I mean, it's one thing to drink a little water, I guess, but I'm not a doctor either. But like, to me, it would be one thing to like slip up a little and, oh crap, I just had some water. But like, she's sitting there eating the whole turkey.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it was interesting to me. I knew they kind of set up with the doctor that he's certified in various areas, but theoretically, again, Gracie was seeing him in the capacity as a pediatrician, and yet he's the same doctor who then takes out
her tonsils.
So
yeah. So also, my understanding is like, a tonsillectomy was the standard of care, like when we were kids. But I remember seeing a headline in, let's say, the past 5, maybe 10 years, that like it really doesn't stop you from getting strep throat. Like it's sort of unnecessary. I mean, again, I'm not a doctor. This is my recollection. I was the kid who had strep throat frequently. And the way I remember it is I was told by my doctor that, I had it so often that if I got it one more time, he was going to take my tonsils. Well, guess what? I then didn't have it for like 12 years. So I got to keep my tonsils, and I'm really glad about that.
Your throat got scared.
Exactly. My throat got scared, decided we were tired of going and seeing the doctor, and that was great. And then, whatever. So I just wanted to point out that my understanding is, and again, I'm not a doctor, but a tonsillectomy is not the standard of care anymore. So.
Yeah. Well, and again, I hadn't really thought fully the timing until you mentioned that, Cece's fully dressed when they come to visit her the next day, which would imply to me late in the day, early evening. So, yeah.
I mean, maybe Cece's sorority is like full of early risers and they do like their reunions in the morning, but it just doesn't seem likely.
But she was wearing like an evening gown.
Yeah. She
So.
was, and the scenes during the reunion, it does sort of look dark as if it's nighttime.
Yeah. That's the impression I got.
So, yeah.
No.
Doesn't really hold together when you examine it like that. But which of our shticks would you like to start with?
Let's just start with fashion.
Okay, go for it.
Since I already mentioned Cece's dress, I actually really liked it. I don't know if you did or not. It's like a one shoulder. It was black and sparkly at the top. I think she looked very nice in it.
It also had green, if I recall correctly.
Sure. I don't
like. I think the shawl had like a green trim or something.
The shawl. Yeah.
So yeah, there was a shawl that went with it.
Yeah.
It was okay. Not really my style.
I mean, I personally wouldn't wear it, but I think she looked very nice in it.
She looked nicer than she usually does. But I guess I didn't like the dress as much as you did.
I mean, I'm not saying like loved it or anything like that, but definitely like of the outfits in this episode.
I mean, there aren't that many to choose from in this episode.
Although again, we do get a couple of wardrobe changes from Fran in the hospital.
We do.
Where you wouldn't think it was necessary.
Correct. And we also don't see her, meeting any eligible doctors, except for I guess Dr. Link, but clearly nothing happened there.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. I actually, to refresh myself, I just Googled, a picture of Cece's outfit for the reunion. I still don't care for it. I'm sorry.
I don't care. That's fine.
Yeah, I think you're right. There aren't that many notable things fashion-wise to talk about other than what we've already mentioned. Fran's repeating a bathrobe and the clothing she packed to take to the hospital, or things she's worn that we've seen her wear.
Yeah, I didn't really care for the outfit she wore going to the hospital. It was just a bit too bright for me. It was a bright orange blazer.
Right.
But yeah.
With, I think, a red turtleneck and was it a green patterned skirt?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So.
She also has a big brooch on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on? Or did you have anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
On the fashion front. Should we do Yiddish Cup or notable New Yorkers?
Go ahead with Yiddish Cup.
Okay, so there were two Yiddish words two words I caught. Genug, which basically means enough or stop, like genug already is what she says, and it's stop talking. The other one is Gentile, when, as you pointed out, Gracie said that says to Dr. Link after he says, I'm a gentle don't worry, I'm gentle, and she says, Fran says, I don't want a gentle doctor. That's Gentile. So a Gentile is a not Jewish person. And then the last thing I'll mention is, and I'm glad you brought it up, is where Fran talks about her parents making the annual trip to the Holy Land, meaning Miami. I think that's really a general reference to the fact that a lot of New York Jews, when they retire, they move to Florida. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So notable New Yorkers.
You want to go first?
Do
you want to go first?
Sure. Let's see here. So there was a scene, the scene where Cece ends up spraying Lysol on Fran, where Cece kind of, Cece was wondering, I forgot to say this or, mention it in that scene. Cece was kind of wondering what she should wear. Maxwell kind of is like, oh, well, Fran's, Miss Fine's very fashionable. You can ask her. Cece kind of makes a dismissive remark like, oh, yes, I can just walk into Kmart and buy something from the Jacqueline Smith collection.
Right.
So she mentions Jacqueline Smith.
Jacqueline's, do you know who she is?
I'm assuming she's a designer.
She is, according to Wikipedia, an American actress and businesswoman who was known for the TV series Charlie's Angels.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Makes sense. And she apparently had a collection at Kmart.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't look up. Do you know who Monty Hall is?
I did. So again, according to Wikipedia, Monty Hall was a Canadian American game show host, producer, and philanthropist.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Reba McEntire. Again, I think it's very interesting that Niles is so fixated on the Reba McEntire CD.
Yeah, I sort of wonder. Yeah, so I sort of wonder if that was like a meta joke going on, because Daniel Davis, the actor who played Niles, his British accent is fake. He's actually from Arkansas.
Oh,
so like I
yeah.
kind of wonder.
I think you mentioned that sometime that he's from the South.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah, so I didn't know exactly where, but thanks to Wikipedia, apparently he was born in Gurdon, Arkansas. Apparently he's 75 now.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
There's mention of the Menendez boys, who, if I recall correctly, like they're the ones who murdered their parents, right?
Correct. But
in the 90s, right?
Yes.
Early 90s.
I don't know when they did it, but what was interesting is because Fran is clearly making reference on the TV. The Menendez boys were actually featured on a program in 1994 that aired on CBS called Menendez, A Killing in Beverly Hills. And if I recall correctly, the Nanny aired on it did air on CBS. So according to Wikipedia, so they were referencing their own programming.
Interesting. Yeah. You mentioned Cosmo. That's pretty well known.
Yep.
The Jeopardy tune that Niles kind of hums.
Yep.
The Fran starts singing 97 bottles of beer on the wall. Again, the famous 99 bottles of beer. Let's see here. Did you have anything else? Aside from like the carpet bag, which is like a reference to Mary Poppins, I very much assume.
I thought so. I'm trying to figure out. So there is a reference to a Kate Jackson, but I cannot remember where in the episode it was. According to Wikipedia, and this is where I think things get interesting. She's an American actress and television producer who is known for Charlie's Angels. So there are two Charlie's Angels references.
Interesting.
And then of course the one that I think we're overlooking is the title of the episode.
Yep.
Deep
yeah, you're
Throat,
right.
Which could either be referencing Watergate or a very scandalous movie from around the same time.
I did not know the second one. My mind went to Watergate.
I don't know. I've never seen the movie. I don't know much about it. I just, when you type in Deep Throat into Google, an IMDb page.
Be careful.
Yes, be careful. There's an IMDb page. Wikipedia has pages for both Watergate and the film Deep Throat.
Interesting. Yeah. So when I first saw the episode title, I was like, oh, is there going to be some type of like spy or mystery or, something scandal or something like that? And then it was Noah's tonsillectomy.
That is deep in the throat.
I know.
For what that's worth. I guess we did miss two others, Barbie, the Barbie dolls, and Playboy, but we mentioned that one already. So anyway, let's go back to Deep Throat is the big one. Yeah, I don't have any others.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Did you catch any 90s nostalgia?
Yeah, I mean, in general, obviously the Cars.
You beat me to it. Darn it.
I know. There was trying to look back through my notes. I mean, just the whole idea of like doing a cosmopolitan like quiz in the magazine itself. Um, I mean, now it's more online, like BuzzFeed quizzes, you know?
That's a good point.
Um, let's see here. Let me look through. Meanwhile, you can let us know if you saw anything.
The only thing were the old cars, for me. I mean, I guess, you know, the lack of cell phones, like had this taken place, you know, today, things would have been different. Like, for example, the children probably wouldn't be ringing bells. They'd probably be sending text messages, right? Or
Yeah, that's
emails
true.
or something. Cece probably would have had her phone at the reunion and would have been, you know, grumpily texting Maxwell, like, where are you? Like, what's taking so long? I'm standing here by myself. She would have been very mopish and angry. And of course, Maxwell would have also been able to tell her, like, oh, you know, the surgery's running long. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm coming as soon as I can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine too, Fran in her hospital room would probably be, you know, messing around with her like cell phone if she had one, instead of like trying to use the TV remote in the way that she did.
Right. And we might have also had a quick appearance from her mother, you know, via like a FaceTime or other video call.
But Kmart, I guess, like that recently went out.
Oh, that's
well, locally for me at least, that went out of business. I don't know larger scale.
I don't think the whole thing did. I mean, I just went to Google and typed in Kmart, and there is a webpage, Kmart.com.
I think there was just a lot of closings.
Yeah,
maybe,
I think they're
in the last
now
couple of years.
I think they're now owned by Sears. I think, but I could be wrong.
What you kind of mentioned earlier too, it's just interesting in today's context, is that scene of Cece spraying the Lysol.
Yes.
It like, yeah, does strike a chord these days.
I mean, of course, nowadays that's one thing, but then if you think about it, if it was happening now, you'd be like, why aren't you all wearing masks?
Yeah.
The Lysol will only do so much, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's it for 90s nostalgia. Any more future fun aside from what you've told us?
You know, it's funny. I'm looking at my notes and I literally have 2 words under future fun, and it says Fran later. I haven't the faintest idea what I was gonna say. I've already mentioned that, you know, Cece continues. I guess I'll add to what I said before, that, you know, not only does Cece, you know, refer to Maxwell as the man in her life and want him to meet her father, but like there are other points where she thinks that her relationship with Maxwell is going to go to the next level. And I'm thinking of specifically an episode in season 3 called Pen Pal, where she decides to take matters into her own hands when Maxwell asks her to work over the weekend, to work late on Saturday night. So we have that to look forward to. Let's see. I think that's really the big thing. I have no idea what I was planning to type beyond Fran later. So
that's fine.
Maybe it'll come
Fran's in later episodes as well.
She is. She most definitely is. Oh, I guess I'll mention this, that it seems like anytime they need to go to a hospital, you see the same picture of, I think it's Metropolitan Hospital Center or whatever, that we see flash before some of the scenes in this episode. So, maybe that's what it was. There is an episode, I'm going to tread lightly here, in season 5, where Fran needs quick medical attention, and she goes there because I'm going to leave it at that, because if I say
Okay.
anything else, it'll give fun things away. So
Okay.
I'm respectful of our wonderful listeners and their desire to not have spoilers.
Major
So,
spoilers. Yeah.
exactly. So
Okay.
that's all I'll say.
So this
Ra-
week,
rating
oh,
time.
go ahead. Hmm?
Rating time.
Yes, it's your turn to go first.
Well, so it's funny. I was going to give this a 5 before we started talking, but you pointed out there are a number of continuity and just logical errors.
Mhm.
I'm going to give it a 4 instead.
Mhm.
I really do like this episode. I enjoy the back and forth that the different characters have with each other. I love anything that is, sort of pushing Fran and Maxwell together. I like it when Maxwell realizes that she is wonderful and there's something special about her. And although in this instance, she clearly is not actually in love with him. She's just in love with love, and she's in love with everybody who crosses her path.
Mhm.
I've always liked this episode, so I'm going to go with a 4.
Yeah, I'm actually giving it a 4 as well. I'm in
Oh,
agreement
hey.
with you that, yeah, I enjoy all the things you mentioned, but also like just the continuous like continuity errors and stuff kind of took me out of it a little bit at times, or like the stuff with the medical stuff where I didn't think it was super realistic, which again, I totally understand this is a sitcom. Like it's not going to be all realistic all the time, obviously. But yeah, so I agree. A 4 for me.
Excellent. We agree. For the record, we agreed
Mhm.
3 weeks ago. So it
Yeah.
happens, and 2 weeks before that. I mean, so sometimes it happens. It's nice. It's nice when we have this happen. Anyway, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 16, Schlepped Away.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.